Hello everyone, and welcome to a One Control Report Holiday Special. It's I think the day after Christmas, I think is when this will be going up. And yeah, I'm still in Japan right now, so I'm just doing some pre-recorded content to give you guys while I'm off doing my thing in another country. So one thing I thought we would do is do something that I guess you could call like the video game bits holiday special, where I'm essentially going to do a random pull of a game and talk about it as I play Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. The reason why I don't play the game directly is because if I were to do random pulls of games and try to play them like actively through this thing, it would be a nightmare process of setting up consoles, putting them down, things like that. So I figured how we would handle this is one game per day in Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. We'll talk about it, and then once the next day switches over, we'll switch on to the next game. And so that will be, I think it'll be kind of interesting because it will limit the amount of time in which we can talk about a game and all that fun stuff. So I believe in we're gonna do the month of December, which will have 31 days, which means we'll talk about 31 games while we play this. So Amiibo Festival is more or less just going to be a backdrop and like a constraint rather than an actual, thing going on. But, we're going to be playing in December. I know Christmas has already passed, so we are going to see the Christmas holiday in this, as you can see on the calendar, on the Christmas Eve holiday in Animal Crossing. We also have the New Year, so this is more of a New Year count up to the end of the year kind of thing. But yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about 31 games. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just play one player rather than have a bunch of amiibos, because then that'll give me more time to focus on talking about the game itself. In terms of outfits, let's see, what would be, that's like kind of like, I don't like that one. That looks kind of warm. That's like a coat on top too. It is the cold winter. So let's go with the second outfit where we have the coat on too. There we go. Can I choose the characters we have? No, okay, that's fine. All right, so we're gonna get started. I'm gonna have to try to remember who's the first and who's the last. So, okay, so after my turn is the blonde kid that I'll have to start wrapping up whenever we talk about a game. So basically, what I do for video game bits is I have a backloggery that I use, and there's a feature on there called the fortune cookie, and I basically unselect everything that's unplayed, although sometimes some stuff ends up in there sometimes because I think it's set as unfinished even though I haven't unplayed it, and then we're just gonna say open that cookie, and there may be times where I need to re-roll depending on the status of the game. Maybe it's something that I've played for like 5 minutes but didn't really have any thoughts on, so I just need to make sure I get a game I can speak to for each of these. So all right. If you're curious about Amiibo Festival, I have a quick play that's up that I put up about a month ago or so. So that I played through this game and kind of explained the rules. I'm not going to focus on Amiibo Festival pretty much at all. It's just a structure for us to get through this. About an hour and 15 minutes for a game, as a heads up. If you're looking at the clock, although you can see how long this video is. So, no time limit. All right. Are you guys ready? It's the first day. What is our first game for the first day? Shaman King Master of Spirits. This is actually going to be fairly easy. So, Shaman King Master of Spirits, I have a review up on the website, but I really like Shaman King Master of Spirits because it takes the Castlevania formula and detaches it from the constraints of the castle of Castlevania, because Castlevania is very much a vertically based game, although there is like some horizontal movement as you go up the castle, but it's very constrained, very cramped, and you have like the same flow in almost every game where it's like you start right here where it's like kind of entrance of the castle, and it kind of goes and reads up, and then you have like an underground area, and those areas have different color palettes and color palettes and things like that, but when it comes to the actual movement of the game, it feels very similar between all the games. So Shaman King Master Spirits makes like basically an open world, or like a flat plane, because there's no like central area you're going to, so you just kind of navigate the region and visit different places. So it really gives you a feeling of like being able to move around, and I like that a lot about Shaman King Master of Spirits. If you're a Castlevania game or fan, I would highly recommend Sean King, and I'd highly recommend my review. I think it's a very strong review that I wrote, and it's probably one of the more popular videos I did this year. All right, next week. Skate or Die for the NES. I bought this game not really on accident. So I bought Skate or Die thinking it was Skate or Die 2. I grew up playing a lot of Skate or Die 2 when I was a kid, and you know, it's not a great game, but I had fond memories of it. So when I picked up Skate or Die, I was like, oh yeah, I love Skate or Die. And you know, Skate or Die 1 is it's a very simple game mechanically, and it doesn't really play particularly well. It also doesn't have that like the iconic theme song of like the skate or die song. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Skate or Die, but you know, I think there is some value to like kind of poking around in it. It's very much that like I think that would have been 1980s, yeah, like 1980s style. Maybe I can't remember if it's like a late NES game, and so it was like early 90s, but it is you know, late 80s style. I don't know if it's on other platforms. I assume it's on like on PCs as well, but StarCraft for the PC. I'm not a huge fan of Blizzard's RTS games. I much prefer games like Age of Empires because I think it gives you a lot more control over a lot more units, so it's a lot easier to kind of manage armies, where in StarCraft you kind of have a limited selection of characters that you can control at once. I think it's like 9 to 10 or something like that. So if you want to move a bunch of people, you have to sit there and like you know, mouse over them multiple times. It's kind of frustrating. So what I ended up doing a lot in StarCraft was actually playing the mod scene, like the user-made maps, and those are crazy. They had like Mario Party games and stuff like that, and like stories you could watch, and you could like make your own movie kind of thing. It's kind of ridiculous what people did with the StarCraft user maps, and I'm curious if there's like a lot of documentation of like what that was like, because I don't see a ton of people talking about it. And I don't know if it's like a scene that's like continues to be active or something like that. Like, I don't know if you could still log into StarCraft on like the old StarCraft and still play a bunch of user-made maps, play all those weird Mario Party tower defense maps. But it like offered a ton of variety, and I think it was great, you know, at the time to make that game way more than it was at its core, you know, level. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time it's really the first Zelda game that I really sat down and played through. I originally played through I didn't play through it, but I originally played A Link to the Past for Super Nintendo, but I was too young to really have a grasp of what was happening in that game. Like, I think I took a while to really get into the video games that had like a core, like a beginning to end process to it. I was much more into things like Smash Brothers and Mario Kart and stuff like that. But Ocarina of Time was like probably the first real big open game I really felt like I had a grasp on, you know, what was happening story-wise, the adventure itself. I had direction, a sense of place that I was going, and I think in 1998 I would have been 8 years old, and so that game, I feel like, is the first time I really felt good about beating a video game. And you know, I think that's a feeling that I still have today when I like, I'm very much into beating video games. I don't like leaving a video game you know, finished. And I think Ocarina of Time was like the first time I was like, oh yeah, this is a feeling that I like. I guess I don't really know how to explain it otherwise. But yeah, it's a really good game. I'm personally a fan of 3D Zelda games over 2D ones, although I think Oracle of Ages is really good. I still haven't played Oracle of Seasons for the Game Boy Color, but I'd like to do that sometime in the near future. I think one thing that I will always say about each 3D Zelda game is they all have their own strengths, and so it makes it, in my opinion, so that none of them are necessarily the best. I think, I'm trying to think if I change my mind at any point, but I still think Ocarina of Time has the strongest dungeon design of any 3D Zelda game. I think all the dungeons are really well made, and even the water temple, which is a little confusing, you know, it's a nice bit of variety from the other dungeons. And I feel like that's one thing about Ocarina of Time, is that each dungeon feels very distinct in a way that I think some of the later games have a hard time distinguishing their dungeons. And I have very firm memories of the dungeons in Ocarina of Time. Okay, open that cookie. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 for the GameCube. I don't remember a ton about this game directly. I was very much a fan of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. And we rented Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 all the time. I think my uncle also had a copy of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. And it was... I picked up 4, and, you know, I played 4, but I didn't love it. It more or less is kind of more of 3. Not in necessarily a bad way, it just didn't do a ton for me. One thing I do have a very distinct memory of is I was not a big fan of the soundtrack, and so basically I turned on, I think it was the Ace of Spades, I think is what it was. And so pretty much the entire time I played Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, I listened to that song that's like, if you like to gamble, blah, 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 blah. And that's like, whenever I think Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, that's like what's in my head. I don't know if I have Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 still. I'd have to look at my shelf. I think I do. Tony Hawk Underground. I actually can't see Elemental P, QRST. I'm pretty sure I still have a copy of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4. I don't have Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 though. I know that much. I think those are Underground and 4 are the only ones I have now, I think. Oh, Assassin's Creed I haven't played through. I got Shaman King Master Spirits again. Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. This is a game that I've played long enough ago that I'm probably not going to have a ton of strong memories of. I think I was, I don't remember how old I was, but I was definitely younger than 18. I will say that I think unlike a lot of people, I really like Metal Gear Solid 2, and I think the reason why, or at least, you know, in the context of the Metal Gear Solid series, it's one of my preferred games. And I think the reason why is I'm not a huge fan of Metal Gear Solid's gameplay. And I think Metal Gear Solid 1 and Metal Gear Solid 3 are very strong games, gameplay mechanics that people like, but I don't like stealth games. So for me, Metal Gear Solid was very much I'm suffering through this video game so I can get the story and enjoy the story. And so Metal Gear Solid 2, I think, has probably one of the most elaborate stories of that series, at least in my opinion, from what I remember. I think I said Metal Gear Solid 2 is my favorite Metal Gear earlier, but I actually, what is this, Friday? We haven't bought turnips yet. I think Metal Gear Solid 2 is my favorite game story-wise, but the Metal Gear Solid 4 is probably my favorite gameplay-wise because it kind of reduces the need for stealth, and you can kind of just, like, you know, shoot through everything. Metal Gear Solid 2 is also a game that I bought from GameStop, and the case was in a nightmare mess. I actually have a blog post about it on my website. I used to call it the STD case because it was so disgusting. And for a while I left it that way, but this year I actually cleaned the case and fixed it up. And when Tim came and visited me, he was disappointed to see that I had removed all the funk from that game case. I just realized that I had like a text slot up on this game that I was going to change the game title for, but you know what? We're not going to even worry about that. So it's just going to say video game up the top right, because I don't feel like deleting that right now. That's a good card to get, by the way. Anyways. You know what? I'm going to change it to say video games is what I'm going to do. I don't really have anything else to say about Metal Gear Solid 2, so. Video games. That was not what that was supposed to say. It was supposed to say the game I was talking about every time, but switching between games between these days is too long, so. Pokemon Red version. I haven't noted for the Game Boy Color for some reason. That's strange. I mean, you technically can play it on a Game Boy Color. Although, interesting note, like, that game is entirely in red if you play it on a Game Boy Color. Just kind of silly. I'm not a big fan of Pokemon these days, but you know, I was definitely in the crowd of kids. I was like prime time 8-year-old kid when Pokemon Red came out. I'm gonna adjust my camera a little bit, and so I was definitely like the prime market for that, and I enjoyed it at the time, and I got both Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue, but I had a lot of trouble with RPGs in general when I was a kid, And I think what made Pokemon work was that you could kind of just pick it up without too much trouble if you walked away from it. So it wasn't like a Final Fantasy VII where it was like this heavy story that if you weren't paying attention to or if you had stepped away from the game for 6 months and came back, you weren't able to kind of like figure out what you were doing or what was happening story-wise. Pokemon Red, very basic story and everything. So, one of the, and this is more of like a nostalgic memory. I used to tell my parents that I was scared of the dark. Although I was like slightly scared of the dark when I was growing up, but it kind of became less and less of a thing as I got older. But I would tell them I was scared of the dark so I could have a night light, and then at night when they would go to bed, I would go and take my Game Boy by the nightlight and play Pokemon Red on there. So along with another friend of mine, although I think I got caught because I think one day I fell asleep while playing Pokemon on the floor, and they were like, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing? You're supposed to be sleeping, boy." I wish I cared about Pokemon more. It's a series that I always think about looking at again, but I never really have gotten into it. I picked up Pokemon White or I rented Pokemon White and tried to put some time into that, but I found the game hadn't changed enough for me to really feel good about I don't know. I didn't even beat it because I just was like, I'm good. I think I've seen all I need to see in this game, kind of thing. If I bought the game, I'd have more of a need to beat it, I think. Pokemon Silver, actually, I do have a copy of that, and when I was a kid, I Game Sharked my way through it, so I don't really consider myself having beaten it. So maybe at some point I'll sit down and play through Pokemon Silver. But Pokemon Red is the one I definitely spent the most time with. I think I originally had Pokemon Blue, but when I bought Red, I think I put Charizard in my party, and I like Charizard a lot. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misremembering. But I had both Pokemon Red and Blue, because at the time, I was a kid and I didn't really understand the differences between them. Thought they were like different games, but they're not really. But I wasn't like somebody who wanted to, see the like capture all the Pokemon or anything like that. So like getting both copies didn't matter that much to me. Oh, never played that. Castlevania Harmony Despair for the PlayStation Network. I'm a big Castlevania fan, and so you think I would be into something like Castlevania Harmony Despair, but it's a game that always just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I think for a variety of reasons. It does reuse assets, but I don't think that's a really big problem with the game. I think the biggest issue with Castlevania Harmony Despair is that it just doesn't feel quite right. Like something about the physics of the game and how you move just feel off. And I'm not sure if that's something that would improve over time. I don't know if it could be that it actually controls exactly the same, but the scale of the game, because it's a console Castlevania game that uses the same graphics as the Metroidvania style games on DS, GBA, and PlayStation. I think like you're a little like Tiny Dot a lot of times, and I think the movement feels weird because of that. Because like the screen is more zoomed out, so it feels slower in a lot of ways than a Castlevania typically would, even though it might actually move at the same speed. It might just be a perspective thing. I think one thing that has also kind of got me to stay away from it is stay away from going any further is because it's just super grindy and repetitive, and I get that that's kind of like Monster Hunter was kind of the game of the day back then, so a lot of games were trying to build their franchise in a way that was similar to Monster Hunter or their spin-off games or something like that. And I don't know, I think there could have been more variety, or at least I felt like there wasn't a lot of variety when we did replay the levels. But I mainly played as Yoko, I think her name was. So maybe if you played more different characters and stuff. Although again, leveling everybody had their own like different leveling requirements, so I kind of ignored it. 3D Super Hang-On. So I have this on 3DS. It's the 3D remake. Well, not really 3D remake, but like there's those 3D classic games on 3DS where they would take an old arcade game, NES game or something like that, and then just kind of give it like some depth to work with the 3DS's 3D view. And what I Oh, I haven't seen him before. What I don't really have a ton of thoughts about the game. I just like the main theme a lot. It has a really good music. Oh man, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can say about the game. I mean, those 3D classic games in general, I think are really neat. They're done by M2, and this isn't related specifically to Hang On, I think. Although I'm trying to remember if this Hang On also had this. But Outrun has a thing where like you could get different cars in that 3D version that had different control types and things like that. And I thought that was a nice way to add variety and in some ways make the game easier. I can't recall if Super Hang On has that though. I don't have a very distinct memory of Super Hang On for the 3DS, but I do like Sega racing games. I wish I've played more of them and was better at them and enjoyed them more in general. But, you know, can't love everything. Oh, dang it, that's not what I wanted. But Daytona USA is one I like a lot too in general. Oh no, I went the wrong way. Damn it. Oh well. Anyways, it's fine. We'll go this way. But yeah, Hang On. That theme is great. The din 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 din. Like that's a really good song. I wish I cared more about the game itself. I'm not a huge fan of those kind of racing games where it's like, you know, the bending track that is like on a 2D plane, because, you know, to make a 3D racing game back then, it was not particularly easy. So, okay, good. I don't want to talk about Hang On anymore. Killzone Tune, I have not played. Christmas Nights. I love Nights. I think it's a really cool game, and Christmas Nights in particular, I think is a neat thing because holiday video games are not something that you get a ton of. And Christmas Nights in particular was released for the Saturn as like, I think like a demo of Nights that was just basically kind of, I don't know if it's a unique level or if it's just the first level that is written over with like Christmas graphics, but I think it's really cool. And then I've played the PlayStation Network version, which has some other stuff in it, but there's a lot of variety in the holiday stuff. They have like a Halloween thing. Well, the Christmas Nights doesn't have a Halloween thing. It has like a Valentine's Day thing, a New Year's thing, things like that. One thing I really wish there was in Christmas Nights for the PlayStation Network is in the original Nights on PlayStation Network. They give you the opportunity to play with the original game's graphics, and in Christmas Night's case, they don't actually let you do that. You have to use the new graphics, which isn't necessarily a terrible thing, but I wish they gave you the choice to play using the new graphics. I need to make a decision here. We'll take the 257. Okay. So yeah, it's a fun game, and I wish there were more holiday games in general, honestly. You know, obviously live games have their holiday events and things like that, but I like kind of like the self-contained holiday thing in a game. And even if it's not like a holiday game itself, like a game that uses the clock on the system to do something holiday related. I think that's really cool, and it's like a nice surprise for people who play on those days. But you know, every game wants to be a live game these days. So when they do their holiday stuff, they have to like super advertise it. That in like video games, there's nothing like secret about video games anymore, really. So I think a lot of developers just kind of, you know, put it out front and say like, hey, our development costs are so high that you have to experience this content we made. We will not make it optional, so we're going to shove it in your face of like, hey, you can play using this because we absolutely want you to, you know, find the value in playing this thing. But it's a really cool idea for a demo disc, I feel like, and it'd be nice if more games did something like that with like a specialized demo, but I realize that, you know, takes a lot of effort. Never played Team Fortress Classic. Kirby's Blowout Blast is a really cool game on 3DS. I might try to do something with it at some point. I have this like desire to play a game that is like a 3D Kirby game, because there was this like 3D Kirby game that they showed off at one point in a Wada's Asks, and I always thought it looked really cool, and I'm still always just like wanting that full 3D Kirby game, even though it probably wouldn't work out well. And so Blowout Blast is not really a full 3D Kirby game. It's more or less like an isometric Kirby game. Plays more like, you know, a Zelda kind of thing. But the whole thing is that there's no power-ups or anything like that. It's all based around sucking in enemies and sucking in more enemies to build up like a greater star that you shoot out, and then making a combo based off that. And I think there's something really cool about like using Kirby's base skills in a game. Part of the reason why I like Kirby Dream Land so much is that Kirby is like limited to a specific skill set, and he doesn't have like the power-ups to really, like, you know, I don't know if cheese his way through the levels is the right word, but like it makes him a lot more limited and control in a more unique fashion than most other characters in other video games. And Blowout Blast feels like it's a game that tries to embrace that to some extent, although because it's isometric, it plays very differently from Kirby's Dream Land. But it's a fun little downloadable game. It's like I think like an hour or two long, and then I think if you want to like 100% it, it's like another hour or so. I played it on a plane flight, had a great time with it, so maybe at some point I'll record like a full playthrough or a quick play of it or something. So turn up value crashing. Good thing I sold. Men of Valor for the Xbox. I really like Men of Valor. I originally was planning to do a video game review of Men of Valor. It's a weird game, at least on the Xbox. There's a PC version as well, but I don't know if it's as weird as the Xbox version, because you know, this was at a time when shooter controls weren't exactly, you know, 100% decided on console platforms in particular, and so people would still try to do some weird things from time to time. So in the case of Men of Valor, it plays very much like a Wii game, where when you pull the scope, so you know, you look on your sights, your cursor or your little iron sight doesn't stay centered in the center of the screen. It actually will move around the screen. So when you're like, your camera is fixed, but your gun kind of moves around like this. And so it's very much like a Wii game where you have like a bounding box, and then if you go outside the bounding box, it causes you to turn. And it's just kind of plays pretty uniquely. It's a Vietnam shooter, so it's also kind of a semi-unique setting, although there were a lot of Vietnam shooters at that time, because I think people were trying to get away from World War II and didn't realize that Modern Warfare was the way to actually do that, when Call of Duty actually finally did that with Call of Duty 4. Yeah, it plays really well. It is not very kind to Vietnamese people, I think. It's a lot of Vietnamese stereotypes and things, I think. But I don't really know much about it, so I'm not going to be offended for somebody. Glory of Heracles for the Nintendo DS. Glory of Heracles is a game that I got for $1 new, and I still question if it was worth it. It's just, there's nothing wrong with Glory of Heracles. It's just completely average. It's a pretty straightforward JRPG for the DS, and it's basically about, you know, you're Heracles, and there's another guy who says he's Heracles, but you're the real Heracles, and you have amnesia, obviously. And I don't really much about the story other than that, and honestly, it's just really straightforward. There's like some fun like mini games when you're casting spells to increase damage, and that's kind of neat. And it feels kind of like Final Fantasy VIII summons kind of thing. But otherwise, there's just not a lot going on in that game. And I think one of the funniest things, though, is that it has kind of a weird sense of humor at times that doesn't really like stick around too much. Basically, like, there's cases where it's like, hey, oh, I got a rock garden. It's cases where it's like, hey, like, if you go in and you try to take stuff out of people's houses, you get like punished. They'll like hurt your like standing with your party members, and they'll kind of like comment negatively on you if you take stuff out of people's houses. You're like, oh, I found a potion. Like, are you stealing stuff, man? It's kind of silly. Oops. Haven't played that. Snowboard Kids 2 for the Nintendo 64. I'm a big fan of Snowboard Kids. You know, it was very much the type of game I liked at that time. It's just kind of a Mario Kart racer, but, you know, in snowboarding form. So, you know, it's a lot of, like, you know, power-ups and stuff, and, you know, increase your speed and let you attack other players and things like that. I think one thing that's really neat about Snowboard Kids, it is a game that, like, very much like Mario Party 2 has a lot of like themes to it. So like you go to like a house that has like a bunch of toys set up, and you get shrunk down and you just like snowboard around the toys, and you have like outfits set up for specific missions. Like so when you go into space, you have like a space suit that you use and things like that. And I think that goes a long way with giving that game its charm, and because it has like a pretty solid story. I mean, solid story isn't really a great word, but like for a racing game of that style, it has a really cute story. And it's just basically these kids interacting with each other, pretty stereotypical kids, and you know, them harassing each other and doing different things, going to birthday parties and things like that. And there's always some kind of conflict that happens that needs to be solved via snowboarding somehow. It's just kind of cute. It's very like chibi cute game. I need to play more Snowboard Kids games. Oh, I still have more time. Because Snowboard Kids 1 on the Nintendo 64, I've barely played. There's also like a Snowboard Kids Deluxe for the PlayStation, but I think that's a port of Snowboard Kids 1. And then there's also Snowboard Kids on the DS, which I didn't review particularly well, but I would really like to check that game out at some point. I may try to do that sooner rather than later, but, you know, that's something I've been saying for probably the next, you know, or for the last like 5 years about Snowboard Kids. I would like to get more DS games in general, especially since I have a way to somewhat play them with, you know, the Wii U. You know, whether or not a game works can be a little iffy, but, you know, I think generally it seems like so far from what I've seen from my Wii U DS emulation, it's like it's consistent enough that I feel comfortable just kind of buying a game and seeing what happens. I don't feel too bad about, you know, it's not more likely to break or something like that. And sometimes it's like very minor graphical issues, like with like port to through and things like that. So maybe someday I'll play Snowboard Kids on the DS. I haven't seen if it actually works on Wii U very well. I like how he's like trying to clap his hands, but he can't reach his hands, so he's just like slapping his chest. I haven't played that. Oops. Yoshi Touch and Go. Speaking of DS games, I really like Yoshi Touch and Go. It's a game that I've talked about a lot on the website. If you go search Yoshi Touch and Go, I probably have like 4 or 5 things that I've done for it over the years. And I pretty much say the same thing every time of just like, it's a super chill game. It's just kind of fun to get into. Like it's very easy to pick up and play because it is very much just kind of like a score attack kind of like, you know, rate like basically play through a mission or play until you know you die, and then you get a score ranking at the end and go on a leaderboard. And I really wish they would bring the game to like to mobile or you know, port it to something and as like a digital download. I mean, as a full $30 to $40 DS game as it was originally, it definitely wasn't worth the value of that in terms of like the content. You know, I've got my worth over the years, so I don't feel too bad about it. And I was like super desperate to get any kind of DS games at the time because the DS library was pretty slim, content-wise. And I think that game could be really successful though as a smaller digital title. But honestly, I think if you just slap something called Yoshi Touch and Go on like a storefront, people probably wouldn't be particularly happy to see that. They probably would be kind of upset because like, hey, give Yoshi his real due diligence, because I think people don't like Yoshi Touch and Go typically. At least the general feeling I get is that people in general are unhappy with most of Yoshi's output outside of the original Yoshi's Island. And you know, as much as I would like it, I don't think people would like having Yoshi Touch and Go re-released. Kirby Superstar for the Wii. I'm getting a lot of Nintendo stuff. Admittedly, I have a lot of Nintendo games. You know, I have this problem with a lot of like classic games that kind of established a norm, and I think a lot of Super Nintendo games did this, and some early PlayStation games as well, where you know, Kirby Superstar does some interesting things, but there are also interesting things that have been kind of elaborated on by the Kirby series over and over and over again. And then so when you go back to play Superstar, you kind of are just like, oh yes, this is the thing the games have been doing since, you know, all these releases have been doing. And reiterating on, and Superstar, you know, just doesn't really, I don't know, it just doesn't really feel, the prices are kind of high, but I think I'm gonna disrupt the world because I want these high price slots. But Superstar is kind of more of that, in my opinion, of the good Kirby stuff, which isn't a bad thing. Like it is a good game. And, you know, it is interesting that it has like so many different games in it that you can play, or you know, variations of what Kirby is in a single game. And I think that's really cool and like a neat way to you know, explore that series in a fun way. I would rather have what Kirby Superstar was versus something. Oh no, I'm in debt. I'm gonna lose a happy point. Versus something that I can take the happy point hit. 60 is pretty low. But I think, you know, I think I would rather have the whole like 9 minigame thing in Superstar than just like a straightforward Kirby game. Although I do like Kirby Dream Land 3 a lot, which I played around the same time as Superstar. I might like Dream Land 3 more than Superstar, to be honest with you. I don't know why. I don't have any real feelings on that. Gun Gauge. I made a video about Gun Gauge. Ah, damn it. I made a video about Gun Gauge early this year as well. And I don't really know if I have anything else to say about Gun Gauge. You know, we did a podcast on it as well, and even that podcast was kind of redundant. It kind of covered the same stuff as the video. So I think, you know, going forward, I don't want to do podcasts that are basically just, you know, recovering a topic that I've already done. One thing I will say about Gun Gauge that I might try to do in the near future is that before that podcast I did with Rowan, I spent a little time trying to refresh my memory on Gun Gauge because, you know, I had done the video quite a bit before, and I played Gun Gauge on hard, and I actually saw some slight differences in the game, which makes me want to go back to the game and see what going through the game on hard does. If it's just like are there any significant differences? Like, is there a different boss fight? I don't know. I don't think that's the case, but you know, it's kind of hard to say. Oh man, turnip prices are crashed right now. It's Tuesday. We're gonna write out a little bit and see if the turnip market changes a bit. So, anyways, so yeah, yeah, I don't know if I have really more to say about Gun Gauge, but I'd like to revisit it on hard, and maybe I'll do that in the near future, and because it's only like an hour long. Although being on hard, it might be more difficult to get through. So. But yeah, go watch my video review on Gun Gauge. It's a thing, or listen to the podcast with Rowan if you don't want to watch my video review. First Guest Story, Desktop Accessories Disc Volume 3. Okay, I need to remember which one this is. I know it has Hunex Fighters on it, but let me pull up the case I have to see what else is on it. All right. Okay, I think this just has Hunex Fighters on it. So, so yeah, First Guest Story Desktop Accessories CD Volume 3 is the most important of the desktop accessories discs. Maybe to some extent. It depends on how you feel about it, I guess. Because it has the Windows version of Hunex Fighters 98. I've made a video about this as well. Getting a lot of video content once. So I won't talk about Hunex Fighters 98 much for the PC itself. But this desktop accessory CD, I'm trying to remember exactly what's on this one. But I think this one has a lot of concept art and stuff. So it's like a really valuable disc if you're a fan of First Kiss Story and want to see like how the character development, or how they develop the characters. I believe that's in Volume 3. I have 3 First Kiss Story desktop accessories, which as far as I can tell are the only 3 there are. So I may be mixing some of these up. If you need, like, desktop accessories 1 and 2 are pretty cheap if you can find them. So 3 is the most expensive. But yeah, you can see like different uniform colors, different character designs, things like that. I don't think there's any other games on here. I think it does have like window assistance, so like they'll like, you have little characters that will float by your window and just kind of like float around. I'm trying to see if there's anything specific about this particular disc I can remember. But really Hunex Fighters 98 is the big thing on here. One thing I don't know if it's on this disc or not. I think this might just be mostly wallpapers, though. I'm looking at this. It's hard because like installing these discs is kind of pain because they're Windows 95 and 98 discs. it can be difficult to see exactly how that content was intended to be looked at, because sometimes you have to like install a program. Although I think in the case of Volume 3, it basically was just like, hey, you just look at a web page that we built. So yeah, it's an interesting disc. I unfortunately I've archived Volume 3. So if you want to see what's on Volume 3, go to archive.org. I've uploaded that disc on there. I do need to archive Volume 1 and 2 still, and I also need to get some higher quality scans of the manual and everything, because the scanner I have at my house is kind of garbage. 1080 snowboarding for the Nintendo 64. 1080 snowboarding is a game I liked a lot as a kid, but when I think about it mechanically these days, I remember it being very punishing. I'm saying this as somebody who has not played that game in a very long time. I've played 1080 Avalanche since then, and I really like 1080 Avalanche. But I remember 1080 snowboarding being very stiff and very punishing if you fell over. You know, you have like a health meter and stuff like that. And I remember the trick system being incredibly difficult to work with in that game. So I don't have like the strongest feelings on the original 1080 anymore, but I did play a lot of it as a kid, and I did enjoy it, so I don't want to say it's like a bad thing or anything like that. I do really love the music, though. The this is a test, this is only a test thing. You know, for the Nintendo 64, having like music for those kind of extreme sports games was kind of a difficult task, because, you know, the 64 didn't have a lot of cartridge space. So they had to be very smart with how they made the music in their games. So usually they would pick songs that have like repeating phrases. So I assume because they're just going to reference the same audio file over and over again, rather than, you know, having to have a full like 2.5 minute song that like a PlayStation game would have that's lined up. So you know, every time it says this is a test in the emergency broadcast, it does that like using the same audio file every time. I would assume, you know, I'm not 100% privy onto the technical know-how of how that game worked and how the audio worked on the Nintendo 64, but that would be my assumption, to save space and things like that. I do really like the character roster that 1080 snowboarding introduced. I like Ricky Winterborn. I like Rob Haywood. They're a fun series of characters on that like they're a fun series of characters that ended up in Wave Race Blue Storm and also 1080 Avalanche. I'm not sure if those characters are in the original Wave Race. I think Wave Race came out before 1080 snowboarding, if I recall correctly. So I would expect that, you know, if 1080 or Wave Race had character names that match those character names, that would be kind of the origin of those characters. But, you know, in the case of 1080 snowboarding, those characters have faces and things like that, and they have a little bit of a voice clip. So you have, you know, Rob Haywood, you know, when you select them, they'll say something. So. Man, all this Kirby. Kirby's Dream Land 3. Kirby's Dream Land 3, I don't have a ton of strong memories of, but I remember really liking the aesthetics of Kirby Dream Land 3. It's like this very, I don't know how you'd call it, like, pastel color, game. Like everything's just kind of like the entire game is basically looks like it's drawn in crayon, which I think is really cool for the Super Nintendo at the time. You know, obviously you see a lot of games that kind of you know, go for some kind of unique gimmick visually these days, but I think we typically have like the power of these systems that are easily capable of doing that stuff. I feel like on the Super Nintendo that probably would be a lot harder to try to make a convincing crown effect, but you know, I don't know, maybe it was easy. Who can say? But anyways, yeah, it's a fun game. And I think that's like a 2-player game. Although I remember it being weird because, oh yeah, that game has like pets in it from the second game. But I remember that game being weird because you could play co-op in it, but only one person could be on a pet at a time. I assume because of technical limitations of the Super Nintendo. So whenever you got on a pet, it feels like you were kind of, I don't know, not really leaving the other player behind, but it felt like the other player who was playing with you didn't exactly have you know, stuff to do. All right, we're gonna catch out here because it's getting scary. and we're getting towards the end of the week, so tomorrow is my only other day. So if I roll bad, I'd end up in a bad spot. At least we got our money back. We didn't really lose anything. Anyways, so yeah, Kirby Dream Land 3, I like that game. It's fun. I didn't 100% the game. I don't really 100% Kirby games, which I think also that is terrifying if that happens to you, where you lose all your turnips. But yeah. Okay, there we go. I got Pokemon and then Pokemon Silver, which I haven't really played through, and then also, well, I played through the game for Shark, but I don't really have anything to say about that. And then I got something else that I also haven't played through. I can't remember what it is though. Okay. Killer 7 for the GameCube. I think this was my first Suda51 game. I got this at the time when the GameCube library was being clearanced out pretty hard because we were getting closer to the Wii era. So I got it for about 10-15 bucks. And I really enjoyed it at the time. You know, I probably shouldn't have been playing it. I was maybe like 15 years old, but my mom generally just didn't care if I got M-rated games. And, you know, I'm very thankful that she didn't because, you know, at least, you know, for me, I was fortunate enough that, you know, I you know, was mature enough to really play those and, you know, not have any issues with it. Where, you know, some people, they do need to be managed a bit more. But yeah, Killer 7, I like that game mechanically. It's weird. You're on rails and you run around with a gun and you shoot people. Like shoot smiles or whatever. It's a weird game, and I like the, my favorite thing in the game is actually the, like, let's go get our stamp down here. My favorite thing in the game is the little conversations you have with, what in the world? I've never seen that glow stick before. My favorite thing in the game is the conversation you have with like the girl with like the head in the washing machine and the guy who's named Travis, who isn't actually, you know, Travis Touchdown, but kind of looks like him to some extent. It's a silly game, and I like the sound of the voices. Like, I need to pause this and look up what this is. This is a Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet downloadable content. I just need to see which downloadable content this is. I think I know which one this is though. Yes, I do. Okay. Yeah, so Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet Ambush of the Imposters is kind of an interesting downloadable content to some extent. I mean, it definitely feels like a reuse resources kind of DLC, where basically a character in the world is creating clones of different characters in the game. But the clones are based off like previous data. So at some point during the game's MMO and the in-game story, so the game takes place in MMO in the game itself, somebody pulled the data for all the characters and stuff, and the data also includes personality and dialogue and things like that. So you end up seeing like these versions of characters from like years ago. So you know especially when you're like a teen or something, you know, you develop pretty quickly, and your personality and the kind of things you say, I feel like, change over time. Sword Art Online, I think, does a really good job of reflecting that in that Ambush DLC, because it like takes, I think the content is technically from like a year or two ago, and the characters, like the person's kind of embarrassed to like who they used to be and things like that. And you know, once you get 18, you kind of settle into a particular personality type, I feel like, and that kind of solidifies even more as you get closer to like 25. And I think about the time you're 25, you're probably like, you know, generally the same person. But you know, I'm only 29, so who am I? What am I to say about, you know, how age development goes from here? Though I feel like generally, since like being 25, I have largely stayed the same person, although I have had some like life changes that have changed some of my values. But you know, you're always going to have something develop. Anyways, this is about DLC and not that, but I think that DLC does a good job of representing that, and it's a fun little expansion pack for that game. Shoot, I went the wrong way. All right, oh well, I'm not really trying to beat this anyways, so it's not a huge deal. Anyways, so yeah, I think it's a neat little downloadable content pack. I wish the DLC in Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet like had a lot more content to it that was significant. If you've played the base game of Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet and you feel kind of like underwhelmed by the content, and you're like, oh, maybe the DLC will fix that, I can tell you right now, pretty much all of the DLC and Fatal Bullet is a lot of recycled content, unfortunately. So if you want more of the same content, you can get that. Tomina Senna for WiiWare. I think this is originally a mobile game, or at least, or it was a WiiWare game that got ported to mobile, one or the other. But it's basically an automatic runner. So you're a businessman running through Japan, basically the oh, maybe I'll be able to, you know, I think it was twice Dice Day, so I think I went really far back in the direction. Anyways, but you're a businessman, you're running through a town, and like a bunch of really silly things happen. So like people walking around in giraffe suits and stuff, and you kind of like just press the A button on them to perform an action. So you end up, you know, basically going around and jumping around town, doing dances and things like that. It's just basically a bunch of really silly events for every person you run into. Some of those events are longer than others. Sometimes it could just be simply you kick that person out of the way. Sometimes you do like a little backflip over somebody, or you do like another series of events. It has a cute aesthetic to it, and there's actually a 4-player mode as well, although the game kind of like tries to set you up for failure, because as you do better, the character you have, I think, gets closer to the right side of the screen and the camera zooms in more. So it actually becomes very difficult to keep track of, okay, well, that's fine. It becomes very difficult to keep track of what's coming up ahead of you, and I'm pretty sure that's very intentional as a way to, you know, try to punish you for, you know, not really punish you, but like, you know, make you mess up. So it's a fun game. I wouldn't really go out of your way to play it. If you downloaded it for some reason but never got around to it, I would say check it out. It's a Konami game too, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if the mobile versions are still available or not, either. So, all right. Oops, crap. All right. Oh, it's still his turn. Oh, yeah, words. Valkyria Chronicles Challenge of the Eddy Detachment. This is a downloadable content for Valkyria Chronicles that I ended up playing this week. Or not this week, this year. And it was okay. It was a very challenging mission, I found. I think it's one of the weaker DLCs of Valkyria Chronicles 1. Because also in addition to that package, there's the Savaria DLC. Oh, 100 turnips, thank you. Too bad the turnip prices are crashing. And then so the Eddy Detachment is more or less just one mission that you do, and it takes place of like a series of characters that are side characters in the main game. And there's not a lot to say about it other than it's pretty challenging, and you have to be very specific about what you do to get a good ranking, and depending on the ranking you get a different ending to that DLC. I think more than anything what that DLC did was it kind of laid the foundation for some of the side character stories in the Valkyria Chronicles series. Valkyria Chronicles 2 has very character specific side stories, so it doesn't really feel the same as the Eddy Detachment. But if you look at Valkyria Chronicles 4 and how it handles side stories, it's more about like a group interaction that's happening. And Valkyria Chronicles, the Eddy Detachment DLC feels a lot more like that, where it's like a series of characters that they're trying to highlight and flesh out their personalities to. Because the original Valkyria Chronicles is very main story focused, and 89. We'll hold out this week for now. It's very main story focused, so this is like the first attempt to really like expand the story for some of these characters. I don't really know why Eddy in particular was chosen. She's technically an idol, but the whole gimmick with her is that she's a terrible singer. And I think I personally prefer her sister Anisette quite a bit more, but I generally have, you know, stronger feelings towards Valkyria Chronicles 2 characters. I think largely because they're more fleshed out in general. So I haven't played that. I got First Hit Story, Desktop Accessory CD Volume 3 again. WarioWare Touch for the Nintendo DS. I remember when I bought this game, I was warned not to, mainly because of you know, the fact that everybody was saying WarioWare Twisted was a better game, and you know, I've never got around to playing WarioWare Twisted, but I don't regret playing WarioWare Touch. I think it is still a strong game, and for a time when I was very desperate to get some good DS games, because the DS market was not particularly strong at that time. You know, DS didn't really take off till like 2005 or something like that. I really enjoyed my time with WarioWare Touched, and you know, it was a good showpiece for the platform, because otherwise, you know, the touchscreen stuff you were getting at the time, it was mixed at times, and so you did have some minigame collections in like the Super Mario 64 DS collection, or the Super Mario 64 DS remake that included some touchscreen minigames, but you know, the WarioWare franchise really freed them up to do kind of whatever they wanted. and I think they're definitely a lot more inspired. And you know, because the mini games are so short, it gives you a lot of opportunities to explore some interesting ideas, even if they don't particularly work out. And that's kind of the thing with WarioWare in general, is that it's like it's a safe place to play in, and because the mini games are so short, you don't have to worry about the strength of the game itself. So you know, you had a lot of things like Pack Picks coming out, Yoshi Touch and Go, which you know had these interesting ideas for card games. That's nice. Has some interesting ideas for card games, but or for mini games, but I don't know, for touchscreen games. I don't know. I'm out of time. Sorry. Pen Triathlon for the DS or Dreamcast. I haven't played a lot of that actually. Let's not talk about that. The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past for the Game Boy Advance. I'm not a fan of The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past very much. In the same way, I'm not a huge fan of Kirby Superstar. It's not that it's a bad game. I just think that the series has built upon the foundation of A Link to the Past pretty heavily. And so, you know, when you go back to play A Link to the Past, if you played other future Zelda games, it becomes a bit difficult to appreciate what it did and does, because you've seen so many iterations on this, and you've also seen it built. And the way I compared it before is like you basically build like a floor plan to a house, and you have this base floor plan that you've built, and then as you create other houses around it, you know, you add on different things to make each of them unique. So this one has a balcony, this one has a pool, things like that. And A Link to the Past feels like you take the standard house from the Legend of Zelda series, and that's basically what you're working with, which isn't a bad house. But it's just, there's not a lot to it that distinguishes it between all the other places. If anything, it has slightly less. In some ways, I could definitely see people arguing that makes it, you know, more valuable. Let's see what kind of prices we got ahead of us. We're kind of into some dangerous territory up here. I'm gonna cash out here, as much as I don't want to. Anyways, so yeah, I just feel like that game doesn't have a lot to really distinguish it, unfortunately. But it's not anything of its fault. It's just the fault of Nintendo constantly iterating on this core design between its 2D and 3D games, and not really distinguishing the experiences enough between each release. Half-Life Opposing Force. This is developed by Gearbox, I believe. No, sorry, that's Blue Shift that's developed by Gearbox. Half-Life Opposing Force is a part of a series of expansions for Half-Life, which I really liked. So I actually got into Half-Life pretty late. I did see Half-Life when it first came out, when my dad got it, but I didn't spend a lot of time with it. I don't think he really wanted me to play it because it was kind of spooky, I guess, or something, or it is an M-rated game, although he's okay with me playing Quake and stuff, so whatever. Anyways, but yeah, Half-Life Opposing Force and Blue Shift I'm going to kind of talk about because of this. The nice thing about it is you play these different perspectives of the main game. So you know, you play through as Gordon Freeman for the main game. I win. So with Opposing Force and Blue Shift, they basically have it taking place in the same time period, but you're playing as a different side of the experience. And so one of the great things about that is the characters get to see the results of like what Gordon Freeman is doing, and kind of you get little parts where you can see Gordon running around and things like that. And so, you know, it's not based off the things you've done, unlike like a Nier Automata, where, you know, you can go back and like watch the menu movement in the second half of the game that is of 2B, the main character, when you're playing 9S, and like her menu movement matches what you did as a player during that time, which is kind of fun. So it's not so much like that, but you do get to see Gordon running around on like a path, and you can remember like, oh, I remember playing this part when I was Gordon Freeman. And I think that's just a really cool way to kind of like interlink all this stuff, rather than just telling a completely separate side story that has no overlap. And I think they've gone back and patched the original Half-Life to include the events of these, you know, Opposing Force and Blue Shift, so you can also see those characters and their existence in the world separate of, or you can see them moving around in the main story as well. So it kind of interlocks all of these at some point, and I think that's a really cool way to go about that. I wish more games did something like that, but you know, I realize that it's not super easy, and you know, most of the time with DLC and stuff, it's being created as like a separate experience. But you know, I think even more so with DLC games, that is a possibility in some ways. But you know, maybe it just isn't worth the time. I'm sure there's probably some issues in doing that. Resogun for the PlayStation 4. I don't have strong feelings on Resogun. I think it's a fun game overall. It's very much plays like Defender in a lot of ways. It's very like, you know, side-scrolling arcade shooter kind of thing. And I remember it was like one of those big games at the PS4's launch, you know, similar to like how Geometry Wars was like this big Xbox 360 early title that came out that kind of persisted because it was an arcade score-based game. So it had a lot of replay value, unlike, you know, a you know, standard shooter experience on a console like that. Like nobody was spending a lot of time with the launch game of Killzone for the PS4. Thinking about it, I don't know anybody who ever talks about that launch Killzone game anymore on PS4. But you know, Resogun was a very strong game, and you know, because it has like a lot of replay value, I think it stuck around for a long time. And yeah, I really enjoyed. Well, I enjoyed it, and I played it co-op with a friend. Was the reason why I ended up picking it up. And I think it's very satisfying to play. It had a lot of like particle effects and stuff, which is pretty cool. I don't have a ton of thoughts on it. I'm trying to remember if is that Housemarque Games? I don't think it is. I could be wrong about that. I seem to recall the developer of that. Maybe it's the developers of Super Stardust. I don't remember. Anyways, it's interesting to see those kind of games, but I wonder like if the sheer number of those types of experiences coming out these days really devalues the need for a game like that. Like I feel like the early PS4 eras when we were really getting to like peak indie game, like, you know, releases and stuff. Let's see. Hopefully I don't lose a ton of money. I'm hoping I'm gonna lose some minimal stuff. Oh, it's painful. Anyways. So yeah, but yeah, that kind of game, I think I wonder what the value of that is. I don't know if like for coming PS5 generation we'll have something like that towards launch, because like there's just so many games that already do that, and I think backwards compatibility is going to be a big part of the next generation and bringing your stuff forward. And so I wonder if like, you know, the massive library of these current consoles will kind of prevent people from really latching onto one of those games. We're getting a lot of games from this year. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. I streamed this game, so if you want to go watch the stream of that is out there. And you know, I think, you know, I talk about this in my New Year's post, so I'm actually going to make an executive decision here to skip over Resident Evil 7. If you want to hear about Resident Evil 7, I have a New Year's post going up on December 31st. Please check that out. Okay. Final Fantasy V for the PlayStation. I really like Final Fantasy V. I think the reason why is I really like its characters. They're kind of straightforward overall in terms of you know, their design and their story arcs. There's not much special about them. It's a very, you know, back then Final Fantasy kind of had this pattern where you'd have like a story-based game to a mechanics-based game, and goes back and forth, probably up until like Final Fantasy X or something like that. I feel like you had kind of that, because I think like Final Fantasy VIII also falls in that vein of like a mechanics-based alteration. And so yeah, I really like Final Fantasy V, and like one of the fun things about Final Fantasy V that I think is maybe a little underappreciated is that each of the characters, and you know, this has kind of gone on in Bravely Default and stuff, and Bravely Default in some ways I guess you could say is somewhat of a spiritual successor. Maybe not. I don't want to make that claim. I've never played Bravely Default. But yeah, I do like that they have like a bunch of outfits and stuff in that game. Like every job class has a unique outfit, and each character has their own sprite work for those outfits. And so it's just like a very cute thing. And I guess, you know, you had Final Fantasy III on NES that also had a similar thing. Although everybody was Onion Knight in the NES release, it wasn't until the DS release that they really gave them unique clothing, which kind of evolved into 4 Heroes of Light, which kind of evolved into Bravely Default from there. But yeah, I really like the outfit design in that game, and I like the main job and sub job system, which I think would be an incredibly important part of Final Fantasy XI and things like that. So I think Final Fantasy you know, 5 is a incredibly important game in that series, but maybe it goes a little underappreciated. Although I think it's getting more and more popular over the years. Whew, only 2 more games left. The original Sonic the Hedgehog. I always called Sonic the Hedgehog the game where you are constantly trying to just hold left. And by that I mean every time you go fast in Sonic the Hedgehog, you kind of want to stop. And I say this as somebody who doesn't memorize the level design. I think if you memorize level design of Sonic the Hedgehog, and you know, if you played these games back when they came out, you probably were playing them over and over again and getting that memorization in. But when you play it from a modern perspective, where you typically just play a game once and then just kind of move on, I think it's interesting kind of how slow you kind of try to go in the game, or at least like the game is trying to constantly make you go fast. And you're just like, no, please stop. So I call it holding left the game, or holding left the side scroller, which is kind of the opposite of the holding right, idea with like Gunvolt or something like that. Yeah, and I really like. I do like Sonic the Hedgehog 1 because you know that game, that's how that game is. I think the important thing is consistency in Sonic the Hedgehog. And Sonic Hedgehog 1 is consistently like, working against you. So you need to be behaving a certain way. And Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is basically hold right the game, because I think the game is very very lenient on platforming and things like that. So it's very easy to just like hold right the whole game and just go really fast, and the game seems built for that. Where something like Sonic the Hedgehog 3, not in Knuckles, I haven't played and Knuckles, but I've played Sonic the Hedgehog 3, it often feels like you are going back and forth between times where they want you to do a lot of platforming and times they want you to go fast, and there isn't necessarily a lot of information to tell you when you should expect one of the others. Something that I think Sonic Colors addressed by going between the third person and second person view, because as you switch views, you knew what to expect mechanically from the game, and I think that was very important. Where Sonic the Hedgehog 3, unless you memorize the level design, you didn't memorize that. Anyways, Sonic the Hedgehog 1, it's a cool game. I'd recommend playing it. The final game, hopefully something good. Oh boy, we are getting like every video I made this year. Mighty Number 9. I love Mighty Number 9. I know most people don't. But it's a really cool game. And it really feels like a game that in my opinion has pushed forward the Mega Man series more than most Mega Man games. Unfortunately, I think people were very unhappy with the direction they went, and so like we'll never probably get another Mighty Number 9 game again. But I think but what's important though is that it's that the reason why that game is good is very much for the reason why a lot of indie create games are good, where the game is very much all about the flow of the main mechanics, and so there are some things that don't necessarily match that flow, like the special weapons and things like that, and oh jeez, that's awful. Anyways, but yeah, I think that's what's important about those games. So games like Gunvolt are not necessarily like Mighty Number 9, but in spirit, in terms of how they control and how they were designed, I think feel very similar. So if you are a fan of Mighty Number 9, I really encourage you to check out Gunvolt. It's different in how it implements its mechanics and things like that. And I wouldn't say that it's a similar game, but I think the design philosophy behind Mighty Number 9 is very similar to Gunvolt 1 and Gunvolt 2. I can't speak for the new Gunvolt, and I think the Mighty Gunvolt series is actually going against that philosophy. So, that was a lot of talking. I was surprised how much stuff we got from this year. I'm a little disappointed because I feel like we kind of recovered a lot of ground when we could have explored, some more new stuff. I have a fairly big collection, and I'm surprised that we mainly got stuff that I've talked about this year already. But that's a little sad that you can't you just increase the value even though you've capped it out. Like, it'd be nice if the number just kept going up. Anyways, whew. Thanks for coming. I'm hoping you're having a great holiday season. I'm hoping I'm alive in Japan and not in full anxiety mode. But yeah, I had fun with this. Video Game Bits is probably one of my favorite things to do because it's just like I have to be quick on my feet about talking about games, and I wish I did more of that stuff, but it's kind of difficult to really find a good place to do it, and because it creates a lot of kind of, I guess, junk content on my website if I just kind of do it like individually at a time. So I'm glad I got to use it for this. I thought that was a fun format, having like a very specific time limit that I had to do, even though the length of the day depended on the events and things in Amiibo Festival. So that in this game is so laid back and easy enough to control that I was able to talk without having to do too much with the game itself. So this was probably the best way to do it, rather than trying to switch between games and show those games off. So. OneControlReport.com is the website. Thanks for coming. There should be some other stuff. This should be coming out after the Blue Stinger Christmas Eve stream. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out. I basically played the Stamp Rally and Blue Stinger, and then kind of show off that game a little bit and what I like about that game. I think the shopping mall in that game is kind of the epitome of what makes that game great, and I basically just kind of walk you through that part of the game, and it has some fun pen stuff, pen triathlon stuff in there too. So if you like pen triathlon, go check it out. So you can get all the silly voice clips that I don't think show up in any other version of I don't think Pen Triathlon has a lot of voice clips for characters and things like that. So you get to hear Pen Sparky be like, "Thank you for finding me," and stuff like that. It's silly. Otherwise, though, there's the New Year's post that's going up at the end of the year. So on December 31st, come back and check that out. I basically talk about 5 thoughts I had throughout the year. And then also talk about 3 games that I found surprising this year. I basically was like, hey, these are the games that jumped out to me the most. So check that out. And then also I talk a little bit about the 2020 plans. Although honestly, at least as of the recording of this video, which I'm recording quite a bit ahead of when this is coming out, I don't have a ton of plans for 2020 at this point, but I know the general feeling of what I want to do in 2020 at the moment. So I don't expect too much to change, up until that point, but maybe I'll solidify my plans, and hopefully if I do that before I go to Japan, not move to Japan, not moving, just going there for 2 weeks. If I do that before I travel to Japan, I'll update the post to be a bit more accurate to what I'm doing rather than just kind of a more vague feeling and things like that. Anyways, I hope you have a great holiday season. If you're out of work and everything, and spend some time with family if you have time to spend with family, or if you don't, then hey, I'm here most days still. I'm still posting content even though I'm not actually here. So, yeah, monkeyshowreport.com is the website. I hope you have a great week. Bye.